There we go. So, let me go to the first page. So this is entitled Decoding in Action. I'm Susan Norwell, co-founder of Rett University, and here with me is...
I'm Courtney Barnum. I'm Susan's right hand and a prior special ed teacher and a sister of a woman who had Rett syndrome.
So the reason I decided to do this webinar is that I was noticing that I first of all, making words to me is like my Bible when it comes to decoding. But I was finding that when my kiddos were transitioning to, this is a level G book, if you're looking at a leveling system. So towards the end of first grade, as they're getting more text to read, there was a lot of, even though they were in the same lessons that would make it possible for them to be reading this. So let me start out by saying, these are kids that are at lesson, 80 out of 100. They're at 80. I've even have a girl at 95 out of 100, and kind of got to this and was like, put the brakes on. And so what I know is that the text to picture ratio gets really greater. In other words, when we're looking at level A and B and C books, oftentimes you can answer the comprehension questions by just looking at the pictures, which is the same as it is for gen ed kids, by the way. It's not like I'm doing anything special. I'm using books that are leveled for kids in general education. So there's less picture support, and it requires much better decoding skills, but actually more fluid decoding skills for unknown words, because you're not teaching every single word necessarily in the book. They're depending on you at that level to use the skills you have in decoding and to apply them into the story. Which requires more emotional confidence as well as more persistence to task. And I've said this many times in speaking about individuals with Rett. First of all, I'm going to go back to that emotional piece and say that even in the non-Rett community, if you have kids that have emotional issues, especially anxiety or uncertainty or lack of risk-taking, which falls into kind of that whole basket of emotional needs, they struggle with reading. Because reading truly is a risk-taking adventure, okay? So that, you say a word, you sound it out, you do the best you can, and then you think to yourself, does that make sense? And you go back and you try it again. And it takes a certain amount of emotional resiliency to be okay with making mistakes, all right? And also some persistence to task to be able to noodle through all of that. And I think what happens for our kiddos with Rett is at the point in their life that they are developing their perseverance to task and their confidence. The first thing we gain confidence in is our bodies, okay? And that happens about 12 to 18 months. You'll see kids, figure out how to crawl up the stairs and they'll come down. They'll crawl up the stairs and come down. They'll do it like over and over again. You see them, they do a slide. They go up the slide, down the slide, up the slide, down the slide. They're gaining confidence in their skills, which then translates later on to just general confidence. Because the first thing we have confidence in is our body. We wave our hand in front of our face and go, oh, there's my hand. Let me do it again. See if I can see it again. Yes, everything starts to click. And right around the time our kiddos are at this stage of developing emotional confidence or a belief, a strong foundation in their skill level, they're losing skills. So people always ask me, do you think there's an emotional component, anxiety component of Rett that's embedded in the MECP2 deletion somehow, or do you think it's a learned behavior? And it could be that it is part of Rett, but I think it's a learned behavior. I think that right at the time they're supposed to be developing competence in themselves, they start losing skills. Then we look at persistence to task. I am blessed that I've had grandkids living with me at various points in my life. Right now I have an 18-month-old granddaughter living with me. And if she can't figure out how to do something the first time, we're supporting her and helping her to persist and to complete that task. When you have fewer motor skills, though, it's kind of, people feel guilty. They feel bad making somebody persist to the task of whatever you're asking them to do, even with support. That, yeah, you are going to help me carry this plate to the sink after dinner, or yes, you are going to help me put these clothes we just took off into the hamper. People aren't usually thinking that way with our kiddos with Rett because they don't have good hand use, but where does the persistence to learn to read come from if we're not helping them persist to a task that we're helping them through? Okay, so that's kind of the thinking, my thinking after all these years of working with so many individuals with Rett, is that when they started blocking at level Chi, I didn't just say, okay, their decoding skills aren't good. I looked more at the last three. Is what's that fluidity of decoding skills? What's their emotional confidence? And what's their persistence to task? Okay, so that's kind of where we are. And so in reading in general, there are, I think these pictures say it really well, there's kind of like a balanced approach to learning to read. And then there's what we do in the U.S., which is this pendulum swing, where we kind of ride the theory du jour until we find out it doesn't work, and then we fling back to the opposite of that theory du jour. And in my lifetime of teaching reading, we're like on our third or fourth cycle. Okay, I can tell you right now that that's what's going on. Now, I will also say that you need a lot more skill if you're going to use a balanced approach. Balancing these rocks on these sticks was probably not an easy thing, because you have to be, really steady, and you have to really think it through, and you have to understand all aspects of each rock. You can't just have one skill set that you're moving with and swinging back and forth between. So in my career of a teacher, I'm not even going back to how I learned to read, because frankly I can't remember how I learned to read. I think I just read, so I don't know. But that it was only decoding when I first started teaching. We had this thing called Distar, which is really horrible and awful. And so there was this heavy emphasis on letters, sounds, and decoding and putting words together. Then about the time my son Matthew went to school, and he's 37, we were in the give them good books and they will read. If we just kind of just make reading fun and give them a lot of good books, they're going to be fine. Now, he came out of first grade and said, I really liked Miss DeVeerman. She was an Apple Award teacher, but I didn't learn how to read. I said, yeah, I kind of noticed that. So over the summer, I did making words with him. We'll go back to that my Bible of decoding. I did making words with him, and he's a bright kid. It wasn't a matter of, it was really probably my smartest kid of intelligence. It was a matter that even smart people sometimes need to actually be taught how to read. He did like a summer of some making words with me, cracked the code, and went back to second grade the next year, and they said, he's reading like 4 levels than where he was. I said, yeah, I taught him how to read over the summer. You might want to consider that in first grade. So this system of give them good books and they will read, kind of got taken away because people were looking at the fact that kids weren't really doing well. And then it raised its ugly head and came back in with the advent of, I'm going to blank on her name, of course, because I'm trying to think of it, but it'll come to me. A woman who really dressed this up and made it look really good, and it made people really excited, schools in particular excited, because it made learning to read a little more fun than adding in the decoding piece, which was where the pendulum swung again back. And they actually discouraged decoding. They said, just give them good books. When they get to a word they don't know, have them look at the picture, have them figure out what would make sense. But guess what? By about the end of second grade or third grade, even first grade, there's not as much one-to-one correspondence between the picture and what you're reading. And so by third grade, the scores really tanked. If you want to listen to a pretty horrifying podcast, read Sold a Story. Lucy Calkins and Fountas and Pinnell. There's the groups that are really dug into this. And if you listen to the podcast, I was horrified by the number of districts that when they were asked the question, did you know that there was no research behind this theory, went, no, we had no idea. Really? You just spent $5 million for your individual district on a curriculum that you didn't make sure had any research. So what has happened, and this is now, right now, is people have gone, oh my gosh, and they went back to just heavy on decoding, and I put science of reading in quotes because there's not much of a science behind it either in terms of only doing decoding, only reading decodable books until third grade. And then we're going to come back to the idea that we really need this balanced approach, all right? That this pendulum has got to stop swinging at some point in time. And actually, people that I really believe in, people that I follow, like, really closely, Jim Cunningham, his wife, Patricia Cunningham, David Copenhaver, the Center for Literacy and Disabilities at Chapel Hill with Karen Erickson, really talk about this kind of approach that takes a look at all the aspects of reading, and that if we don't look at it all together and give them good decoding skills and give them good books to read and read to them so they understand what comprehension of language is all about, and embed writing so that it all becomes this integrated work. And that's what we believe in at Rett University, is this art of really creating a balance. Today, I'm just looking at the art of balance in decoding. Okay, and how to balance this with only thinking about making words. And I sat and talked with David Copenhaver a lot about this because, again, I'm seeing this kind of shut down when things get a little harder and wanting to figure out how I can ease that transition for the girls and boys that I work with that have Rett syndrome. So we have to do great decoding, and we need a decoding program which is making words because it's less metalinguistic. It doesn't say you have to say what I say, or it doesn't give you 18-word directions to follow. It's easily adapted so they can actually move the letters around to make the words, so that they are actively doing the work in this program versus just listening to other people do it, okay? Which has got to be frustrating, and it doesn't build for good decoding. The words are all in isolation that they're making. They get a closed set of letters, and we have done other talks on making words, so I'm not going to go into it in depth because I want to get to how we're adapting it to help our kids. And there's a closed set of letters, usually in the beginning, 1 vowel, 5 consonants, and the generalization is built in. You don't just learn the at words and the an words and the in words so that then you get a new set and all of a sudden you're applying what you just learned to the new ones and you get all confused. It's actually moving the letters around within words so that you might have the T at the beginning or the T at the end, so that generalization is built in. So you make the words with these closed set, you review the words, you sort the words. At first it's beginning letters and later on they're sorting by rhyme. So we're starting to see similarities between words, which is really important because the transfer of a known word to an unknown word is really the highest level of learning. I think that's in Maslow's hierarchy, that once we can take something we know and we can transfer it someplace else, we have really learned it. So we use the word sat to figure out how to spell splat. And so that piece of transfer is what David and I were talking about. And I'm saying, I think that what my kids need is an additional level of transfer. Like they need to transfer that decoding into some other arenas so that it's not just you can decode and now you're going to read. They need like some steps in between, which is what I've been playing with. And my most anxious kiddo has made so much progress that I know that it can work. And then the word study is important. They'd still have to have sight word instruction because you're never going to get to the from T, Taha-E is just never going to work. All right. So the first thing I did in this art of balance of decoding in action is that I started to look at the vocabulary that we typically teach at the beginning of a kid reading a book. And all of the reading, whether they're using a Basel series or whether they're using Reading A to Z or whether they're using store-bought books, there's vocabulary that teachers teach beforehand. I stopped teaching it, and instead I have them decode it. I have them look at these new words, and I know that the new words are within the scope of what they have learned in making words to decode. So I'm not just giving them a word to decode that they don't have the skills to do. Okay, so they have the skills. And if they get stuck because the word might be a little longer or because they're having a little trouble, I don't just give them the word. I do a think out loud. I'm thinking out loud about how I would attack the word. I show them the syllables. I divide it up. I teach them strategies about what they can do with a longer word. Or I say things like, you made a word. Let's say they're trying to decode distant. And I say, you have made a word that has A-N-T. It was in the first lesson you did in making words. You get to the point in making words, you've done it often enough, you can start to recall what lessons they've learned what in. But if not, I have a cheat sheet that I keep right here. It's from the front of the book, and it's got all of the lessons and what are the major sounds that are taught, so I can refer back to it. And so they have to look at the words and they have to decode them, and they tell me I know it or I don't know it. I have some kids will say, I know how to say that word, I don't know what it is. I'm like, oh man, that is so cool that you're starting to think about how to decode it and also its meaning. I mean, now I feel like, this is the stuff that makes me so excited, right? I'm a sick person, I know, but it's what really floats my boat. So they start to get this confidence in what? Decoding unknown single words, okay? Not the ones that they're making in making words where they're going letter by letter. It's kind of moving it to decoding it in single words. And so we've moved a step closer to what they're going to do when they're reading a book. And then I use these closed sentences. There's this great program called Vocabulary A to Z, and it has these closed sentences that go along with some of the books that I use from Reading A to Z. And I say, okay, now you've decoded all these words. Let's put them in a sentence. So I read the sentence, and they have to put the word that belongs in there, and I give them 3 choices, and they have to decide which word would fit in the sentence. So now we're assessing, did they really decode it? Or were they just faking it and telling me they did? But also, do they have the meaning? So now we've got meaning plus decoding, which really feels like success to them. And they can practice it with these single words and not get so freaked. Just not get so freaked out. But then how do I make sure, here I'll show you a video of, this is Josie in Australia. A whale is a blank animal. I'm going to make it tricky because I'm making them all start with the same letter. A whale is a animal. A whale is a animal. Or a whale is a Okay, so she has already told me, when we've done these words of one at a time, that she was able to decode all of them, whether they needed support or didn't need support. But I titrate my support based on what they've already learned. So let's say they have made the word pig, and she's getting stuck on big, which she wouldn't, but let's say she did. I would say, I distinctly remember you making this word. Again, I don't say it. I show them the word pig. Because what happens oftentimes, and I've seen this in some of my kids where they're doing making words at school, they've done so much helping that they're doing more of the decoding than the kiddo is. So I'm being really careful that when I'm making these little steps, that it's them that's doing the work. All right? So, all whales are a animal. No, not all of them. We can't say a whale because we're like, oh my gosh, not all of them are like that. A whale is a animal. Yes or no? Yes. All right, you're telling me all whales are this. A whale is a animal. Yes. So I've got 2 yeses. So you're going to have to make up your mind about these whales. Would I say a whale is a animal? Yes or no? I'll wait till you get to the middle. Atta girl. Yes or no? No. Is a whale a animal? Yes. Good for you. So again, we're getting to the meaning and we're getting to the decoding. Then I'm like, okay, what's the next little step then? Is I'm not going to swing to only reading decodable texts, but I'm going to give my kids some experiences with some decodable texts, and I'm going to define those as texts that are not as dense or sophisticated in meaning, but are engineered to have certain sounds and certain forms of words, certain patterns in words to be repeated throughout the book. The new ones are not as bad as, the fat cat sat on the mat. I mean, because we could only die of boredom for those. They are much better. They tend to blend a few more patterns within them. But I'm looking at the decodable text to kind of link them to making words. And this is where David, who wasn't really keen on the idea of decodable text, said, well, now this is researchable. This is something we should take a look at because you're linking it. I'm making this part of my making words. I am not making this the only thing they read in guided reading. I'm linking it to the making words, and I'm having them read these repetitively at home, so they read them a few times, so they get fluid in decoding these words that they've been able to make in making words, able to transfer in making words, able to decode when they're single words, and now they're having to do it in a book. So I have them read a page at a time on VoiceStream. I can highlight individual words and say, hey, can you find the word that means this? Again, I'm not saying find bad, find good, find sat, because then I'm giving them the auditory cue. I need them sounding it out in their heads. That's what making words has them do. I read through it playing with the words, literally really assessing, are they getting all of these words in terms of decoding? And then they can read for meaning and fluency. They can read it again, and I can ask them questions and then read it multiple times independently. But I continue reading leveled books, both fiction and nonfiction, so that they're getting books that have more inferences in them, that have more ability to do a compare-contrast, a question-answer, a main idea in detail. I need to have all those reading skills get developed, which won't get developed if you're doing just decodable text, and I'll tell you the story of decodable text. My grandkids another daughter, were homeschooled, and the curriculum she was using for the kindergartner only contained decodable text. That's it. They came to live with me for a couple of months, and I saw that Evie could really read those books really well. 20 books for the entire year of decodable text, 20 only. And so I said, these are like around a kindergarten level here. I'll just give her a kindergarten benchmark and I'll see, what's transferring over. She could read the book perfectly and couldn't answer a single comprehension question, because the decodable text didn't have that level of inference, main idea in detail. What does this vocabulary word mean? It was just to read it, to decode it. So science of reading, I'm not so big on their science at all. So this is a video of me mirroring my iPad onto my computer so I could take a movie of it. And it was being very stubborn today, but I think I finally got it to work. So this is a book called Fun All the Time. Reading A to Z has a new program called Foundations that has some decent decent decodable text. And so I'm going to show you kind of what I would do if I was going to do this book. So we're going to allow Voice Stream to just read the page, all right, by hitting it. You have to turn off the sound, which sometimes is stubborn because it doesn't want to turn off. But you can set the speed for the cursor. It has a slight pause after a period to kind of... And so I typically don't have my kids reading on the iPad until they're at level D, E, because I really want them reading it on the Toby, so I can see that their eyes are tracking the print before I let them independently track the print this way, because it is a motor planning adventure to go across midline, I will tell you. And so, you know, this is a little bit up the road, but I definitely will start now with my kids a little bit earlier, just having them play around with this so they kind of get used to it, even though I'm watching them carefully on the Toby or on their eye gaze device, so I can see that they are definitely doing the tracking. Get them ready to get to the next line of text. Because I'm on an iPad, if I want to, I can do it one line at a time and make it a little bit bigger for them if I need to. So I've got a lot of flexibility because I'm working on an iPad. But I would ask them if they were able to read all the words. If they said yes, I would say, you know, they're asking a really good question here. Okay, so I've highlighted 3 different sections. And what I might do, because I can do all kinds of things, right? I can do all kinds of things. This isn't the only thing. Is I can say, look at this. It's such a good question, right? This is such a really good question. So how would we answer it? Because I think it's asking this question about something we read. Do you think it's the blue words that would answer the question? Or is it the green words that would answer the question? All right, so I can do it that way. I could also say, you know, they're talking about something, one of our seasons. They're talking about that word. Are they talking about this word? Are they talking about this word? Okay, so I can say, you know, they're talking about something happening. Is it the green word? Yes or no. Is it the pink word? Yes or no. Is it the blue word? Yes or no. So what we can start to do is they can read it and we can really dig in and see what words they're decoding. Sometimes I'll say to my kids, okay, I need you to pick the action words. If I'm working on nouns and verbs with them and it's something that we have already worked on, not if they don't know what a noun and a verb is, that wouldn't be very fair. But I could go in and I could say, okay, so I might, you know, highlight this word, and I might highlight this word, and I might, I would highlight that a different color. It's not very fair to make it the same color. And I would highlight that word. And I'd say, okay, now, which one of these words is a noun? Remember, a noun is a person, place, or thing. Is the yellow word a noun? Is the red word a noun? Is the blue word a noun? Okay, I could do that. Or how are they describing? How are they describing the hill? And you highlight 3 different words, and it should be that they pick white. All right, so I've kind of like done some examples here where I have, let's make that a little bigger. I'm like, okay, I just want to know, like, where are they? You know, does the yellow word tell us where they are? Do the pink words tell us where they are? Does the blue word tell us where they are? They should hopefully pick ice. So in the effort of figuring out what they're decoding, I would be that specific about words. You know, I wouldn't say find the word push. Right, so I'm not, I just said that a little while ago, so I don't want to say it again. But I want to be careful not to be giving them the verbal cue, because if I say push, they can hear the P and just look for the P words, which is very different than them looking at all those words and finding the words that are verbs Or, I may even say, what's the opposite of push? And they have to find, make those two words two different colors. But I'm not going to just have them decoding to decode. I'm going to have them decode with meaning. And again, the meaning is going to depend on what their skills are and what I'm working on. But I'm going to go. Okay. So what's happening is, and it's a small group, but a pretty consistent group that is now really taking off in their reading, because we're doing this combination of adding to the making words to have it be decoding within the context of text, which then is a smaller leap to go from that to actually decoding text that isn't as decodable. So I think balance kind of is winning the day. I want it to be fun. It should be effective. It should lessen the anxiety, because we know anxiety blocks learning. The more anxious you are, the less you can learn. We all know that. I mean, I remember from driving stick shift. We still need that good systematic instruction, so we're covering all those bases and lots of practice. So I'm still a big adherent to the 4 blocks, but just this little tweak on the making words and adding in some decodable text into that particular area has really helped with the anxiety and helped with the transfer for my kiddos. So those are my final thoughts. And if you have any questions, I'll have the handouts for this. I'll send it to Courtney, so she'll post it when this goes up on Rett U. You can contact me, you can contact Courtney. Any subjects that you guys want covered, just let us know, because we're here to support you. We're not here to do webinars for ourselves. Our goal is really to help people as much as possible be able to do the best for their kids. So I don't know if you have any questions or...
I don't see any in the chat box.
So I do see some familiar names there.
Yeah, I see some familiar names.
So that's good.
All right. Well, if nobody has any questions, like Susan said, you can email either of us via our email there, or if you guys have ideas of things that you would like us to cover, please let us know so that we can get those out. We do these once a month, and we are doing them for you guys, so we want to support.
All right. Thank you, everybody. Have a good evening. All righty. Bye-bye.
Have a good evening. Bye.
There they go.